just a quick thing first, a little caveat to start with. These slides were finished about 10 seconds ago. I started doing these slides about an hour ago. Okay, I've come clear. They're okay, I think, I hope. This thing is falling apart. So I was asked to speak to you a little bit about the economics. People have thought of so many different ways to make money on the internet and to build companies that are extremely successful. So successful indeed that some of them are actually these days bigger or actually are worth more in capital than established companies that have been around for hundreds of years, or for 100 years, or 50 years, 100 years. I mean, big conglomerates. Looking at Google, etc., you saw our internet history in I think it was yesterday. Feels like it was like a long time ago, but it was yesterday. With Sebastian, with Robin at the time. And so today I'm not going to repeat the things that I had said back then. Does that work? Okay, so that's really good. The clicker doesn't work now. Okay, these are bad. Don't carry a clicker. And so from this session, it's not really goals for this session, I guess. We're just going to go through 4 different things. First, looking at the change of the internet from starting as a military network and then moving over to a commercial network. We're going to look at the concept of a free internet, monetization of the internet, and then the evolution of e-commerce and how it went from the early days of the internet e-commerce systems to what it is now these days. So, remember yesterday? It started out like this, with 2 nodes, and then it went to 3, then 4, then many more. And this was all paid for by the US taxpayer. And this was all not for peaceful purposes. This was all to have a network that would still continue working if there was a nuclear blast that would wipe out the United States. It was not a case of saying we'll be able to remain on Facebook if there's nothing above ground. We can stay here in our underground bunker for a long time. But it turned up that it finally turned into something absolutely huge. Commercial internet that spans the whole globe, and as a result, you can see the different ways that we've had. The ones that we've seen over the years: military, academic, then commercial, then mass media. And the really important part, I guess, is around this part. Between the 1990s and the 2000s, because of the World Wide Web having been invented, there were commercial services that started before that, but the World Wide Web really gave it a boost. And mass media and then everybody and everything changed the way that business was done on the net. It started out very in a sort of standard manner, and then it went a lot further afterwards. So first, the standard manner. One of the early companies that did some business on the internet was a company called cdnow.com. It was launched in 1994, but actually it was a bit unfortunate in that it launched just after Tim Berners-Lee had invented the World Wide Web, but it was text-based, and they had taken several years to develop a system where you would actually telnet to the website, and you'd have a list of all the CDs and all of the music, and you couldn't listen to it because it wasn't dealing with all that. You just had a catalog, like a library catalog of products that could be sold, and you would select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending. You could do a search, etc. Do a simple search. If you didn't write the exact name of what you were looking for, you couldn't find it. But they grew. It was one of the first sites that was selling things on the internet, and you would be able to put some kind of a payment option, which I guess was probably using Telnet. Now, Telnet was using plain text, was probably very, very insecure. But back in those days, the internet didn't gather that much limelight from so many people around the world. So the amount of fraud on the net was pretty low, basically. It launched in '94, and then you can see here it was operated by Amazon.com in 2002. What happened to it? Well, Amazon was also, strictly speaking, launched in 1994, but really it started its operations a little bit later. by that time, sort of 94, CD Now was already well implanted throughout the world. They did pretty well. But when Amazon came up, they came up with something which was very different from what CD Now was doing. CD Now was looking at just selling you a product, saying, you go on there, on this site, you go into our catalog, you buy what you want. Amazon had a different view. They said, you're going to go on there, you're going to be buying what you want, but then you're also going to bring your friends along with you. And you're going to share what you bought with your friends, and you're going to tell your friends, I've gotten this, and your friends are probably going to be interested in, perhaps because they're your friends, buying similar things to you. And it started doing analysis of what people were buying, so that it would actually get like-minded people to buy like-minded things. So you'd buy a CD, and then it would say two things. It would first check it, who your friends are, and would say, well, your friends have also bought this. Would you be interested in buying this? But it will also look at what the majority of people were buying, other types of music that people were buying, or books that people were buying, that you were buying, and basically making a parallel and saying other people that have bought this have bought that other CD and that other book. And as a result, people usually, it's like when you go in a shop and you say, I just want to buy some bread. You go into the shop and suddenly there's something really, something really like sweets or something. Okay, I'll just grab a bag of sweets as well. And there's a promotion on a drink of some sort. Oh, I'll buy that as well. And it's exactly the sort of thing. They absolutely understood how to get people to buy more than what they actually wanted to buy, whilst CD Now did not. And CD Now, as a result, got just basically taken over by Amazon. That is just the e-commerce stuff. And the e-commerce in its sort of most basic way. So you've got a buyer, you've got a seller. The seller will recommend things, very much like a shopkeeper. But then the concept of a free internet came up. And the whole idea that you can offer services without people actually having to buy it. And the thing is, there is no real such thing as a free internet. A free internet, someone has to pay the bill. Someone has to pay the bill at the end of the day. And so it's one of two ways. Either somebody else is going to be really nice and is going to say, I'm going to pay for this, and I want to donate some funding for it. And of course, that's the case with many sites that are not commercial. But then there are other things, which other sites and so on, that need to be paid for, that could be commercial, that could have valuable information, but that have to be paid for. And the way that it has to be paid for in the most basic way is by advertising. The thing, though, is that standard advertising, as in the newspapers, as on television, has had a less impact than targeted advertising. And so very, very quickly, the internet moved from this whole mass advertising when you would basically be reading something and there'd be adverts that would have absolutely nothing to do with what your interests are. They very quickly found out in real time that they would get very low click-through rates. So initially, the first start of advertising was about banners. So how many imprints of the banner are you going to be able to have? But then they found out that the click-throughs were really terrible. So they refined their work. And a company called DoubleClick was really one of the, sort of 95, 96, was really one of the pioneers to look into this and to say, if we analyze what people do on the internet and analyze the way that they move from one site to another, and from one page to another, and what banner ads they click on, maybe we can then propose other banner ads that are very similar to what their interests are. And again, that's pretty much in line with what Amazon would be doing, trying to sell you one product and another product. So they started moving into this advertising phase, and they ended up going into a phase of really starting to look at yourself, your own browsing, so that they could target advertising to make the advertising and the products more interesting for you and get higher click-throughs. Pay-per-click really starts with this thing of spam. First, you have to get to that website before you start clicking on the different things. So the history of spam is actually a bit bizarre, because it started out in the, non-commercial spam. That's how it started out. there was an incident which apparently took place in the late 80s in an internal network, and I can't remember off the top of my head whether it was HP or Xerox or one of these sort of big companies, where one person was in charge of, I think it was like holidays or some announcements and things, and decided that maybe it was a good idea to put all of the employees in the company onto one list. And you could just select all and then send things to everyone. And that person sent it, and of course it actually went to all 20-something thousand members of the company, and it crashed the systems because there was never an idea that you would actually send an email to absolutely everyone. But he did that, and it might be an urban legend, as one calls it, but that was one of the first instances that was seen as a mass sending out of emails, and people were immediately outraged, thinking, what are you doing sending me emails that are not for me? I recall my first spam was one which I think a lot of internet users back in sort of 92, 93 received, and it was one which was called the Green Card Lottery. How many of you have heard of the Green Card Lottery? Glenn? 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, okay, a few people. So the Green Card Lottery was the United States has got this lottery every year, or used to have this lottery every year, where you would put in all your details, and then, and of course that was done before internet, by the way, yeah? You would send in all your details on a piece of paper, application form and so on, and every year they would basically take the pool of applicants, and there would be a lottery that would choose people at random on there and provide them with green cards. A couple of lawyers, Lawrence Cantor and, can't remember the chap's second name, Siegel, Cantor and Siegel, law firm, thought, hey, you know what? Instead of just advertising in newspapers and advertising in publications around the world, maybe we could advertise this on the internet. If we managed to get enough email addresses that we get from places all around the net, and there must be some databases that we can download, then we can send thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of emails, who knows, and we'll get a really good response rate. And not only that, instead of going in newspapers where we have to pay for advertising space, we can do it for free. We'll just send it to everyone. And that's what they did. So they collected an enormous amount of emails. They found several providers that they connected to. I guess they had some knowledge of the internet already back then. And they sent these hundreds of thousands of emails across the world. The result wasn't quite positive because, okay, they might have had some people responding and wanting to go and to register for this green card lottery. But a lot of people also were very upset that they would receive an email that was absolutely not relevant to them. And you do have to remember that back in those days, people were connecting to the internet via dial-up. So they had very limited data plans, and receiving just one email was already something that might take time if there was any picture or something attached to it. And of course, Cantor and Siegel had attached the application form to it. So it wasn't exactly a very small email. It was something which people got really upset with. The other thing is, because they actually had these huge lists, and they had duplicate lists covering different parts of the world, or perhaps different segments of population, they had not actually made the list into one single list, so you received multiple occurrences of that email. So you got 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even more than that. Numbers of emails. So spam, that was one of the first spam things that it basically wasn't received well at all. So nowadays, of course, spam has continued to grow at a crazy rate, and you end up with things like this, dental plans and stuff that have absolutely nothing to do with you. The thing, though, is that if by mistake you actually do click on this, they are already making money, because already, see, the people that send you the spam are different than the people that actually now ask for the spam to be sent. Cantor and Siegel did it pretty much by themselves. There was no agency that was doing this. But these days, there are commercial providers that are out there that will do spamming for you. They have a range of computers around the world and so on. They have ways to be able to try and get that spam to people. And so you can buy spam advertising services of the directory on the internet. Whether it's ethical or not is a completely different story, but that's already available. Banner advertising is another really popular form of advertising. In fact, it is the mainstay of advertising that you have out there. So much so that there's actually been some work done by one of the advertising organizations to actually show standard sizes for banner advertising on the internet. It's actually just taken directly from what the printed press used to have. The printed press has standards of the size of the boxes that you have in publications. So you've got full page, half page, quarter page, etc. But of course, on the website, you've got many more options in there. And as you can see, each one of these has got a different cost. And because you're dealing with a medium that is dynamic, the great thing about this is that you can actually find out which parts are the more likely parts of the page that are going to be clicked on. So a box that is this size here might be slightly larger than the box that is this size here. No, this one is slightly larger than this one. But it's not necessarily the larger box that will get the most clicks. And that's the great thing about it for the advertisers and for the people that are trying to sell you products or advertise their products. Because it really has this immediate feedback to it. The bad news for you, of course, is that they start getting to find out what your habits are. So they don't even know how you read the page. Because the first things that you're going to click on could be the things that, the part of the page that you'd be most interested in. Which is the sort of thing that happens in the real world as well. When you go into a shop, supermarket, I don't know if you noticed, but in the most supermarkets, I think the shop is always located, you have to go clockwise, anti-clockwise, because most people are right-handed, and so most people would be holding a bag using the right hand, and then they would look into the different displays, and picking something with your left hand going in this direction, walking this direction, is easier than going in the other direction. So that's the dynamics of real commerce and the dynamics of e-commerce also go all the way down to that level. So then you've also got video advertising, as you know. You go onto YouTube, you go onto Dailymotion, or there are many different video sites. Again, free videos, free download, you can put your videos on it, etc. But there's a lot of banner advertising on there. And this is all connected to many of the advertising programs. There are quite a few of them. Usually they restrict the advertising to videos that have more than 10,000 views. But on the internet, as soon as you've got some interesting content, going up to 10,000 views is usually pretty quick. And you immediately are able to monetize things. And the thing with videos is that you can have, very much like television, you can have an advertising break at the beginning of the video, or you can decide where you want that advertising to take place, beginning, middle, end, or you can actually have a multiple number of ads. I don't know if any of you have watched television in the United States. It's pretty much unbearable. Well, I find it unbearable because every 3 or 4 minutes there's another ad break. And then you don't really know whether you're watching just a channel with adverts or whether you're actually watching a program. I usually completely forget what the program is about by the 3rd or 4th ad break because it just goes on and on. But there are some videos here on YouTube that you'll find with ad breaks which are equally as common. What they found, of course, is that too many ad breaks means that people will not be interested and they'll just move on. There's different types of ad breaks that you can have on the video. You can have the ones that have, a little counter, so it gets you to really watch it for 10 seconds, and then you can click on skip. That actually provides the advertisers with some information about you. It means you're basically not really interested in that product. That's fine. They'll get another product next time there's an ad break. On the other hand, there are some other ones which basically push the information to you, and you have to remain for the 1 minute that the video ad takes, happens. So that's one of the things. You've got pop-up ads, which are really annoying. So they're not just, you've got your banners that you can skip through. The pop-up ads is when you're actually on a website, and then this thing comes right in front of your face, and first you don't know how to get rid of it, because sometimes it tries to sort of look as though it's, you've got to click somewhere to get rid of it, and you can't, it doesn't work. But then also it has this terrible thing of interrupting your browsing. Most web browsers these days have the option of blocking pop-up ads because they're just so irritating. And in fact, pop-up ads are often being used, or pop-up windows are often being used by people that are running websites that contain malware and things like that, because you might inadvertently click on the pop-up rather than clicking on the website itself. So that's something that's still around. Just on the video advertising, you've of course got these ad breaks that take place. What you also have are these little boxes that appear at the bottom of videos sometimes, or boxes on the side. These are actually programmable. You can ask, for a little bit more money, monetization of your video, you can ask for these to be added as well. But of course, the more ads come up, the more it gets annoying for people. And too many ads have been shown to actually turn people off and not actually click on them. This is a little bit more difficult to find out about the sponsored search stuff. So here's a page from Google that I just looked at a bit earlier. And you do a search for GoPro 5 camera, for example. You're interested in the GoPro. So you do the search, and the first thing you've got is shop GoPro 5 from Google. So this is in fact, well, you think it's just a search, and it's basically saying, oh, these are the best shops around the world, or the best e-shops around the world. Actually, the reply that is coming over to you uses a number of the parameters that Google knows about you. We'll go that in a second, but as you can see, all of the retailers here are in India. So that already knows that you're based over here, and so Google, in providing you with this, has already found out where you are and is basically sending you to these shops. The thing though is that these shops are not just like standard searches that Google found on the internet by crawling through the net, like it does in the other search results. No, these are sponsored. So these shops actually pay for Google to put them at the top of the search. And it's not only the case for shopping, but it's often, in some cases, the case for the actual searches themselves. So you could look at this and think, well, maybe that might be, but it doesn't actually show. That could be a sponsored search and not completely independent, and not just a random search of GoPro 5 camera of the topic itself. That's very difficult. Sometimes you have the sponsored searches on the right of the screen. It really depends on how they do it. It's funny because if you expect the advertising to always be in the same location, you tend to automatically skip through it. If on the other hand, you move the advertising around, then people don't expect it where it is. And so people do read the ad. Even though you might not click on it, people still read it. So that's one of the other types of advertising that takes place. Then you've got social networking ads. And so again, I just did a quick thing, refresh, went on Facebook and had a quick look and stuff. And you've got here a thing, see here? Sponsored. Very, very faint little thing in there. So that goes into your feed of all what's going on with your friends and stuff. And here suddenly there's this sponsored feed. And this company has basically paid to have their thing put into your feed at quite a high position. And you can see here some of my friends have seen this and have responded to this, and look at that, 90,000 other people have, 5,900 comments, 4,700 shares. And you think, wow, these are huge numbers. And this thing seems to be very recent as well, sponsored thing. You look at the date was further down, it was like from today. You think, wow, people, this is amazing. But this actually is an ad. It's an ad to get people to go on this content. And the way that they do it is you have companies that you can go to, and you do, it's all done online, by the way, yeah? And you pay them X amount of money using your credit card. They will have people that they employ to buzz your feed, which is that you're going to put your post out there. So it's not even a sponsored post at that point. You just post it, and they basically have tens of, well, maybe not tens of thousands of people, but hundreds of people that will actually click on this manually and beef that feed up so that you get up to a few thousand. You can have 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 people that will, you know, or clicks on this, that will basically give likes. Some might write comments. And then, as a result, even if you might not have paid Facebook directly as a sponsored feed, you would still have your post go into the, oh, what are people talking about at the moment? What are the big buzz things going on at the moment? Because it's all about attracting attention, and it's all about being able to reach that level where your product, because it's always about a product at the end of the day, where your product is going to be, is going to gain the attention and people are going to buy it. So that's another way that, that advertising takes place. You can see on the right these things. You see suggested groups. These are all you never really know whether they're commercial and they're non-commercial. Some of these groups, the people that started these groups, if you look at this, you know, 340, whatever, and you can see the stupidity is painful group. I mean, how enticing is that to go onto this? You think, yeah, that's going to be a fun one. And you go on that, and obviously you've just been stupid enough to click on it. You're just caught, you know, you've been caught basically. It's painful. It really is. All right. This is the other end. This is the other side. So when you actually go to Google AdWords account, so you log into your account, and you've basically got an enormous amount of information. I'm not going to go into all of the things in there, but they look at, you know, the click-through rate per minute, per hour, the peak times. It performs an analysis to tell you when is the best time to put your content online, depending on who your target is, depending on your geographic location, where the people are, etc. Because there are peak times at which people use the internet, and there are times when people don't use the internet, and so you don't want to post your content out there when you're in a low point. You want to put your content out there when there are a lot of people that suddenly are there, so you can do the buzz exactly when the internet is buzzing, or your target audience is buzzing. There's a whole lot of statistics that they come up with, and of course the final calculation, which is usually per 1,000 clicks or per 10,000 clicks, but it depends on what there are different levels that you can go with on Google AdWords. And that works both ways, by the way. So you can actually have your advertising posted out there, in which case you have to pay Google. And then there is the other way around at that point, which is when you are then producing content and you get other people's advertisings on your content, and then Google pays you. So again, it's one of these ways where it's just so easy to do it, and you don't need to be a professional company to do it and so on. This can all be done with a matter of a few clicks, and you're up in business in about a couple of hours, 2-3 hours or so. Tracking, yes. Well, with all of this advertising, you think, okay, so we started out with these banners, and then we've got money for having other people's banners on our web pages, but we have to pay in order to get our banners on other people's pages. In the meantime, everything is being tracked. First, it's being tracked on your browser, because your browser has got these cookies. Now, cookies were initially implemented so as to make life slightly easier for you. If you always log in the same location, and you, every time you wanted the page to be turned into blue when it's red, because you prefer it in blue, and you've got to log in with your name and password, and you resize the screen, and sort of you arrange things to your liking. The cookies are there to be able to, for the website to recognize you and to pick up where you left off. So you might have done some work and done something. Instead of coming back at the beginning, it will pick up where you stopped, way down the line. The thing, though, is that cookies can also effectively track if you've been on a website before and propose you with other services or provide other services that you might have not looked at to start with. It might go even as far as when you're doing a search for a flight on a website, and then you come back half an hour or an hour or 2 hours later, you search for the same flight again. Because it's tracked you, it might put up the flight price by a couple of dollars more, because that puts pressure on you. You look like You look at it and you think, ooh, this is getting more expensive. I better start thinking about buying it soon, buying my flight soon. This is stuff that has been used by some websites to push people into purchasing. So is it nice? Is it fair? I'll let you decide on this one. But not only does it use the cookies, it also uses your IP address, and through your IP address, it actually localizes you. So it finds you where you are. This is how you had the ads for the Indian companies to supply the GoPro camera. It's absolutely no use if I have to buy it in the US. It also looks at your browser data. Your actual browser has got a lot more data about you. So for people, when you type your name and address and things like that, in some places, your browser can store it as well. So it's actually good to clear your browser data from time to time. But there's also in browsers the ability to surf the net in this anonymous mode. Google has got, the Google Chrome has got this anonymous mode, but then it also tells you at the same time that it still tracks some things. You don't know when it tracks, but there's still some things are being tracked. Perhaps it's not your browser that tracks it, but it's Google at the other end that tracks it. And if they know your IP address, and you've just been in non-anonymous mode a minute before that, and it looks at also any of your computer's details, and the fact that you go to the same websites, then it can analyze this and say, well, we know who that person is anyway. So anonymous is only anonymous by, funny enough, by name or by design like this. Address book is something that you might not have had in a computer, but these days we browse using our mobile phones, and we have address books in the mobiles. And not only do we browse, these days we go even further, we download apps. One of the big problems with apps is that when you install the app, it says, ooh, in order to function, this app requires access to the following. It gives you a big list. And you look at it and you go, ooh, I'm not sure I want to have the app access this. Because, by the way, the app has to access this, which basically translates to the manufacturer of the app will have access to this as well, because the app will, of course, go back to base and update things and whatever. So are you ready to get this application to take control of your address book, of the people that you call, of your browsing history, etc.? And of course, you've just downloaded the darn thing, and you've just waited for it to, and you use some of your data allocation, and you say, yes, well, of course, if I want that thing. So you go, yes. Very few people read this, and it's the same when you're installing a software. Very few people read the software thing, so software licensing. And unfortunately, that means you've pretty much given all that personal information to the app. And when you use the app, you're probably tracked even more than when you're using just a normal web. This is from 2010, so that's kind of a while ago. And you would have thought that it was just like Google AdWords that was tracking you around and stuff. No, there's a huge ecosystem that goes around the whole monetization of data on the internet. And there's a lot of money to be made. So you can see that sort of dozens and dozens and dozens of companies, from analytics to data suppliers, to the targeting of the different ad networks, and there are quite a few of them. The social tools that you've got here, it's just absolutely huge. And of course, all of the main, the huge ad agencies are involved in this nowadays. It's too big a market. This is just for one country, that's for Argentina. And you can see that you've got the big ones and also the local ones as well. It's pretty scary when you look at it. There are extensions to this, making money using advertising. Because, we started out just selling products on the internet. Well, look, advertising seems to be making so much money. Just the very fact of advertising the product, you don't need to sell the product anymore. Domain name parking is something which has been in use ever since domain names were invented. Some clever individuals, and by parking, you can park them or use them, but as long as you actually have registered them to your name and you've paid the renewal fee, you can keep those, and some people resell them because there are some domain names that come at a premium. Someone that I shan't name has gotten a good portfolio with like a dozen names, like house.com type, or generic words under .com, and has managed to sell them for a very, very high price. In fact, that person has retired since. He was an ICANN participant a few years ago. Maybe Sebastian will remember him. Unfortunately, I was around at the time when these, the domain namespace was opened up, 1994, 93, 94. So before ICANN was created. And unfortunately, I used my, because you had to pay $100 for a domain name under .com. You could buy auto.com and house.com and shop.com or whatever. I preferred actually going to the bar and spending it with friends and enjoying myself, which is the reason why I'm not a multi-billionaire. But some people have different views on life. So you can have an investment portfolio on this. There's speculation going on. There are domainers that have tens of thousands of domains. And they invest into the domains, they can resell them, but then they park the pages, and these have got advertising on it. There is a thing called typo squatting that also takes place, which is Google with 3 O's, or with 1 O. So Google instead of Google. Somebody registers a page on that, has got advertising banners on it, and bang, they make money. And I'm told that it's extremely lucrative. It's, again, questionable ethics. But if you have a page that you're not using, or a domain name that you're not using, usually your service provider will tell you you want it. We can host it for free if you want, and we'll just we'll pay it with the advertising. And then from this whole thing of having a supply, demand, and the advertising, the whole advertising ecosystem that comes on top of that. We went into the matchmakers economy. So remember, in our original thing, we had academic internet, and then commercial, and then there was the social networking aspect, what they called at some point the Web 2.0, which nobody remembers anymore now. This whole concept, Web 2.0, and then they went to this matchmaker thing, which effectively started out with companies like eBay. They understood this very quickly. They said, we don't need to sell anything. We just need to put people who want to buy and people who want to sell together. And eBay looked at it and said, well, the first thing that is really a problem is payment. And that's how they worked with PayPal and found ways to actually make easy payment. eBay were not the only auction site that were out there. And in fact, when you look at eBay these days, auctions are just a small part of it. A large part of eBay is actually buy it now. You just click on it and bang, you've got it. But the payment system that goes with it is really, really helpful. Because if you buy from someone you don't know, which is the case 99.9% of the time, that person is selling it to you cheaply. You are able to get in touch with them through eBay. You make your payment using PayPal. And if something happens and there's a problem, there are ways for you to get your money back and ways for the person who's been sending things to you to correct things. So it's got this buyer protection on eBay, and that's what's been really, really helpful for people. Amazon started out, as you know, as a normal shop, and getting people to share ideas and share their purchase lists and so on. And that's how they became very successful. But then they also found what eBay was doing and thought, well, if we actually also have Amazon shops where third parties are able to run their shops and just advertise their shop on Amazon, then maybe that's another thing. And so that's how they've turned from a company that was selling books to really a logistics company these days. So much so that they've actually purchased aircraft in the US to do their own traveling around, in their own sort of moving parcels around. They've got the warehouse space. They use the warehouses with stuff that is not even theirs. They have third parties that locate their shops in their warehouse, and they deal with all of the logistics. And that's a business which has grown at an unprecedented rate. Uber, well, who needs to know about Uber? This typical matchmaker thing, isn't it? You've got someone who's looking for a taxi, and if you travel around the world, you always find, people having to wait. How many people do you see now waiting on the side of the road, waiting to try and flag a taxi, and taxis pass by and don't stop? Very few, because Uber has revolutionized things. You can, you ask your Uber from inside, and you just come out as the Uber is arriving. That's really killed parts of the real-world economy, and taxi drivers around the world are really, really in a bad position, pretty much everywhere. Airbnb, again, complete shift. Very much the same sort of thing, matchmaking. It could have been eBay that did that. Could have been eBay, but they didn't think that it was possible because they just thought, well, no, we're going to buy and sell goods, and this is never going to work out. But really, what it is the eBay of hostelry, as one would call it, and they really are hurting hotels because you see in many countries around the world, and in France especially. France is a country with a lot of tourism, and they do find that the hotels are having occupancy rates that are lower than they used to be, and yet there are more people visiting, and they find that, of course, through flights and through transport. So there are more people visiting the country, but less people using hotels. So obviously, they've gone somewhere, and it's true. The Airbnb has really revolutionized, and of course, I'm taking Airbnb with this, all of these other companies that perform the same thing. So the whole matchmakers thing is pretty impressive, and you know, it's one of the things. It started out as a buyer-seller thing, and then it moved on to the matchmaker thing, which is pretty much what the intermediaries used to be. Intermediaries used to go, well, I travel between India and Europe, and so I'll go in India, I'll negotiate with people over there, I'll do a purchase, I'll purchase something, some goods, and I'll go to Europe and I'll negotiate the sales, and there you go. I'm importing things into Europe, and I'm making the money between the sale and the sale and the purchase. But these days it goes actually even further, because you can actually perform this matchmaking automatically online. Alibaba, not to mention them, has gone one step further and has gone into saying, well, if we do this, why don't we actually get people to be able to purchase from companies that are small and medium in size, but that do not have access to an external market. And that's how they launched their website and Taobao, their marketplace. So you can actually buy goods that are manufactured by small Chinese companies, and those companies, they don't even speak any other language than Chinese. But they receive the order through the website, they perform the order, and then they send it over to the clients at the other end of the world. And Alibaba deals with all of the things in between, the payment, and all of that. However, it is well known that not everyone has the ability to pay using credit cards and so on. And so one of the things that they actually managed to build also from these transactions is the transactional history. And transactional history is starting to become a big thing, because it's also being looked at in parallel with the whole concept of blockchain technologies, where you could record transaction history in blockchain technologies. At that point, when you are doing trade, performing trade, what's the important part? Is it important to know who you're doing trade with, or is it important to know whether you're going to get paid? Strictly speaking, the most important thing is to know that if you're going to sell goods, you're going to get payment for them. And so a transaction history, which is exactly the same sort of thing as a credit rating that is performed usually by a third party. A transaction history is very important. You don't really care who you're selling it to. And this is why these guys at Alibaba, I think, have got a really very clever way forward, because they're doing a lot of work with transactional history. They might go even further, and that's one of the things with China, where the government often is very much involved with businesses. They're looking at extending this also to history, transactional history of people. So you find if somebody is in good standing or not in good standing. I'm not going to comment on that, because I think the extensions to privacy are a big concern. But it's interesting to note that we've moved from a case of simple selling CDs as a first step on the internet to something where everything can be bought and sold in so many different ways, and even the information about selling. So the goods are being sold, but how to sell it, who to sell it to, and how people are purchasing it and selling. So all of that information is being sold on top of that. It's crazy. If you had actually said at the beginning of the internet, sort of early 90s, and said one day everything you buy and sell will be tracked, you would have probably said, well, I don't want any of this. And yes, well, someone wrote this. Remember 1984, George Orwell, It came out as a film, and when was it? It was in '84, wasn't it, that it came out as a film? And everyone went like, we're very far from that, aren't we? And of course now we're really deeply into it. So, but that's a little bit of an idea of how, sort of all the commercial implications of the internet. And it's doing so well. And we're all against it and going, no, I don't want to be tracked and so on. But then we get our free websites and we do free surfing. We're all too happy to do so. So, yeah, thanks. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, having the GPDR getting implemented next year, so we expect the GPDR policy to be implemented in Europe next year, right?
So which one? The
GDPR.
GDPR, yes, the 15th of May or 19th of May 2018.
Yeah. So most of this economy depends on the tracking data, right? The companies take. So how do you see like it getting involved?
I really don't know. There's so many discussions on GDPR at the moment. I have a feeling that the tracking will take place. It's just the access to that tracking that will differ. And so, the companies can still track everything they want about you, but they have to keep that private to themselves instead of sharing it or selling it if it involves a European citizen. And it's on a worldwide basis. There is advice that was given to ICANN actually a week ago or something about the registering of domain names and who is. ICANN is involved with GDPR because of the who is records. Who is records are basically who has registered a domain name. At the moment it's a one-size-fits-all scenario where you basically have everybody's details being displayed if you look for it. Whether it's a company or a private individual, in the future it will have to change because of this GDPR. Not specifically because of that, but there's been so much work on it. So I haven't had a chance to finish reading that advice, unfortunately. I don't know if Asha, did you read the advice or from this Dutch law firm or something? It's very new, so we've all.
No, I haven't, but every day we're getting new bits of advice. So I would just go back to this gentleman's question. You're definitely right in that as long as that information is not sold or shared, is kept private by the organization, then there is no restriction on the tracking.
Yeah. And the GDPR, I mean, as you see, so that could be a test case. With regards to ICANN to see how that information can be held, because I think it's also got standards as to how the information should be stored, the security mechanisms, etc., that are required.
Yes, and not only that, the European government themselves, the EC themselves, aren't even clear themselves about the information they store.
Yeah, so
we're giving them some feedback, and they're also beginning to realize,
yeah.
This applies to us as well. So this this GDPR story is going to continue to evolve and change and become more complicated as the months go past.
And what monster have we built? I'd say.
Sir,
yes, right.
Will you please throw some light about the European Union has fined Google people about.
Which fine? Because there's a lot of fines that there are so many cases now in Europe about Google and European Union.
I'm talking about a particular case about they were manipulating search results about some restaurants and hotels.
Okay, I don't know that case.
Right to forgotten dwellings.
Is it right? No.
See, these Google people, they used to manipulate search results about the nearest restaurant around you.
Yeah.
So this the other company Yelp, which specializes in restaurant and hotel results business. So they have pointed out to European Union that
they were manipulating those results.
Manipulating, and they are in fact cheating to the consumers.
I think this is why I had heard about this.
And I think this is a reference to the recent the DG competition finding Google, the EC's DG competition. So it's a recent AdWords manipulation fine.
Yeah.
With the largest ever, which is on appeal right now.
I do not know the full details of it.
Oh, I think just
I know that
the basic issue is in that image you just passed through, giving preference to sponsored results.
Yeah.
And not making it sufficiently clear that they're sponsored. That was one of the grounds on which the fine was levied.
Here it doesn't, but you see how small the sponsored thing is, and when it's actually on the edge, sometimes it's at the edge of your screen. So it is a tough one.
The sponsored results will be on your right side only.
One person at a time. I've got two ears, but I think it comes out of the same speakers. So, sorry, we'll take you and then.
Sir, the sponsored results are always on the right side of Google page. And other than that, if they are showing any advertisement, they will have to show that these are the sponsored results.
Correct, yeah.
But in case of restaurants in Europe, they have manipulated the search results to favor those who have paid them money.
You have paid the money, yeah.
Actually, the companies.
This is one of the things. So yes.
The companies were subsidiaries of Google only. So the people who were shopped, like you GoPro 5 camera, who were looking for GoPro 5 camera.
Yeah.
And 7 out of like 10 results from Google's own companies. So that was the case, and
that story I have seen, and I've actually used the system. So I have done some searches to buy things, and when you actually do a whois search on the websites that you were sent to, you then find out that it's all owned by the same company, which is an affiliate of Google. So it was, yeah.
So what can be done in this case?
I think
there was a fine of 2.1 billion euros. But if we talk about Google AdWords as well, we're talking like you were telling us, it is very simple to set up a business over there. But if we see, there are so many manipulation in Google AdWords as well. They show different ad, the title will show different thing, and they will be going on like different page after a few seconds. So.
Well, Google and all of the companies that deal with this advertising, and DoubleClick, by the way, which was the first company that dealt with all this, is actually Google AdWords now. So that's how they evolved. They were purchased by Google. Of course, they are not releasing the algorithms that they're using to to perform this dispense of advertising, because they say this is intellectual property. This is their own bread and butter. So they don't have to disclose this. So it's very difficult to know what they use to profile people, etc., and what the advertising engine actually does.
I don't want them to reveal the algorithm, but what can as a community we should suggest? Okay, Google should take some norms to fight against the wrong links and all, advertisement links.
Yeah. Well, in advertising in general, the business of advertising has a lot of ethical concerns, and there are associations that deal with these sort of things, with best practice scenarios, etc. I do not know whether there's the equivalent in the online world, because it's a global network, because it's not a purely national thing. They're not hindered by national laws where they could make changes just specific to the location, but it's still a bit of a wild west in so many cases, and so you just at the moment we're still in early days, and there might be some restrictions placed on the advertising depending on the case that are going on at the moment. And there's so many different cases, between and I didn't go into this, but tax avoidance on the one hand, multiple officers dealing with multiple things, so each serving the other markets, so that they're not subject to national law depending on how they structure it. The whole thing of advertising, there's a lot of this big question mark, and of course it's all called optimizing of resources.
Optimizing, if we talk about Google AdWords, it is not about optimizing, it is about paying more. Whosoever will pay more to Google will come on the top.
It's optimizing of resources and maximizing of profit for Google, yeah. Maybe not resources for you. Let's have I see quite a few hands now, so I'm going to go down this way and then
time
back
problem
up.
also. The time problem also.
Time problem also, exactly. How many minutes are we over, by the way, already?
It's already
We're
over,
0
but-
minutes over, that's good, we still have 10 minutes. So let's
minutes,
go
5
down this way. And then we'll go back up quickly. And short questions, I'll try to be short in my answers.
Okay, so I was really intrigued by the slide in which there's an image of a man and it says you are the product.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about it from the user perspective, and I'm thinking that there's an overlap of several categories when it comes to the end user. So we are consumers of services online, but we also provide data and we create content. So my question is that are there any standards in place for deciding the point at which we stop being mere consumers and start becoming content creators? And are there any standards in place for online labor? What kind of forums are thinking about online labor? And what are some new ways of thinking about labor time, work hours, wages, payments, etc. online? And like, what are the forums that are kind of engaging with these questions? Is ILO participating in IG forums, for instance? So yeah, my question is to do with labor.
Yeah.
So my point is that related to that one, here.
Oh, you hear, yeah.
It's
I was
related to
looking
that
at-
one. Yeah. For example, Facebook, it's not producing any content. Content is information, we are producing the content and they are selling our content. But as per sheet, they are making 9.32 billion increase in revenue and for a quarter and about 3.89 billion profit. But as the real worker or the real laborers, content providers, are we being recognized? That's or the business model is right.
To my knowledge, there are no worldwide, globally accepted rules or regulations about this. It's all national regulations, national legislation. So that's the big challenge because the internet is borderless. So it's very difficult to put any kind of regulation on this at present. It's part of internet governance, so I guess maybe it's for you to think whether you want to regulate this. There are talks, there are always, you know, the constant threat of national licensing and things like that for these global companies. There's also a concern from some that because there's only one Facebook and there's one Google and they have such a huge part, a huge chunk of the market, that they could be seen as having a monopoly. So they effectively are killing all the competition. But then the other discussion to this, and apparently this has been discussed in the World Trade Organization, the whole thing of monopoly, because they're not pushing the product down everyone's throats. It's the actual market that is choosing to go for them. There is no breach, apparently, of monopoly regulations and cartel regulations worldwide. So that's one of the things on the International Labour Organization. I'm not aware on whether they're looking at this. They might be looking at it on a national level and the number of hours that workers are working on these things, but I don't know if it's specific to the online content industry. So then we go in this direction. Our president.
Oh, really? Coming back, so I wanted you, so just imagine a scenario here. You know, imagine yourself again as a 25 or 26-year-old entrepreneur, and you know you attend this session, and especially when you go to that particular slide on future of business models, you have given some suggestions for an entrepreneur as to what he can do in order to set up a business in this world. The last slide, actually. Yes, but the one behind this. Yes.
Make.money.fast.
Yes. So I wanted to ask you a question on pertaining to this slide. That suppose, you know, I take this model and I decide now that I will open up an online market aggregator and try to offer a particular service. So the idea is eventually I'm sure that, you know, I will be able to develop an entire internet ecosystem surrounding that product. But I also know that if I do that as an entrepreneur, eventually there will be an antitrust case or something which will come my way over a period of time.
Yeah.
So how do you as an entrepreneur foresee these challenges and accordingly make adjustments in your business model to ensure that you get your size of pie but no one questions it as well?
So the sad thing about this is that the majority of people I've spoken to that have started .coms that then became very successful we're of the view that you need to start and to grow as quickly as possible, so as to be able to buy yourself good enough lawyers to basically usher away any attack on your product. And it's sad, but that's what I was told. I'm not going to tell which companies though. The reality is that today you can actually build a company, provided you've got the right funding backup behind you. You can build a company that shows potential sales that are astronomical, especially when you deal with content and having data about people. Each customer is worth, I can't remember, was it $17? Each person that is in your database is worth, I think it was $17. So when you've got Facebook that's got, I don't know how many billion people, then Facebook, just by having that database, is worth so much. And so you then have a valuation of the company which has absolutely no relation to the real worth of the company these days. If you have enough investors that throw 100 million and then another 100 million, and then you have $500 million worth of investment, the company, for some reason which evades my mind, is worth 20 times that much and is therefore deemed to be a unicorn. And there are quite a few. Unicorn is a company that was created less than 5 years ago that is still in private hands and that is worth more than $1 billion. And there are quite a few of these around, and they just spring up like this. One really doesn't know whether it's for real or not, but when you're worth that much, or even a fraction of that, they're not bothered by the whole thing that they might fall foul of future legislation that might be imposed on them. And the first thing is, we'll negotiate at the time. We'll find out. We'll throw in. Let's build a few offices over there, and 3,000 employed, and the government will be like, okay, that's okay. You're helping with employment and stuff. But right in the back.
Yeah. Hi. So this the point you mentioned about the domain name parking.
Mm-hmm.
So this industry is quite booming these days. There's a huge market of buying and selling domains. So is this regulated by anybody, or ICANN or anybody? What's the regulation mechanism on these? Because it's a trading, right, which happens. It's just like a stock exchange, like something. Not really a stock exchange, but the exchange. And the prices change, so there's volatility in the prices of the domain names. So what is the regulation mechanism?
There's been some discussion in ICANN, in some circles of ICANN, with regards to the new generic top-level domain program, on whether ICANN should impose price caps, regulation on the maximum price for a domain name and also the minimum price for a domain name. Because what's been found is, you might think excessively priced domain names lead to speculation, but also very low-priced domain names lead to the use of these domain names by spammers, because they just buy 1,000 of them. They use it to spam around. The registry then receives tons of complaints. They chop the domain name out, so they delete it or block it. And next thing you know, they're using the next domain name. So cheap domains are being used by a lot of the spammers. The discussion yielded to a quick answer, which was, no, ICANN doesn't deal with content, doesn't deal with price regulation, doesn't deal with anything that's to do with the use of a domain name. So there's no regulation on it. It's still pretty much a free market, with the additional number of strings now, 1,900 or something, or 1,000, I never know the exact number, 1,500 new strings or so. It seems to have eased the pressure to have everyone buy a .com, so the prices have somehow held, but are not rising the same way as they used to before. So maybe speculation is over, who knows?
Thank you. A quick question which needs a quick answer.
Why don't you take it outside during lunch break?
Okay,
we have to close now. Sorry, 15 minutes late. Apologies, Olivier. Thanks very much for this very lively session, and